Okay. So I'm Ruth from the Student Learning Commons, and this is Maisie, who probably a lot of you know from here at SciSpace. So welcome to the workshop on exam anxiety. It's the third in a 4 workshop series that we're doing right before exams. And yeah, I mean, exam anxiety is a big thing, very common among students. And we're going to try to give you some strategies. Want to acknowledge that we are here on Coast Salish land, the unceded, rightful, and traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam people here at the Burnaby campus. All right, so we've got quite the agenda to go through. We're going to do some definitions first. And then there's 5 categories of things that we're going to talk about. And each of these categories has a few strategies under it. So the time is going to be kind of a big thing. If we go a little bit over 12:20, feel free if you have to leave, don't worry about it. And the recording will be made available. The slides and some other resources are going to be emailed to you after if you've registered or if you give Neela your email address on the way out. And there are going to be resources in the email, but also sprinkled throughout the presentation we'll be discussing. All right, so this is kind of what we're talking about when we talk about exam anxiety, so a lot of times there's just almost complete freezing. I was talking to a student yesterday and he would prepare really well. He would prepare 2 weeks before and consistently for a few hours each day. And then he would get into the exam and he would just kind of lose it all, and that's a pretty typical response. Sometimes, yeah, your mind just kind of goes blank, or maybe not completely blank, but you're forgetting some things that you know very well. And then right after the exam, it's oh, yeah. Yeah, and just the focus, all these racing thoughts. I'm gonna fail, this is too hard, I should have studied this, I'm so stupid. Why didn't I study more? Like those kind of racing thoughts that, maybe you remember things, maybe you're able to answer the questions, but you're going at a bit of a slower pace than you would because half your brain is busy with the anxious racing thoughts. And then the key between exam anxiety and just feeling anxious because you're not prepared is this happens even when you are prepared, so it's very normal. If you know that, you haven't done enough studying for whatever reason, most people feel kind of nervous and self-recriminatory. But, that student, for example, he would prepare well for 2 weeks and then he would go in and there would still be an issue. So let's get to the definitions. Oh, no, not definitions.
Oh,
Yeah, here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
I forgot the order we were talking
I
about
know.
this with, but anyhow. Yeah, so sometimes we've talked about racing thoughts. Sometimes that's how it manifests itself, as kind of cognitive in your mind, in your brain, and just generally feeling upset and maybe really agitated. But sometimes, maybe you're not even connected with those feelings or those thoughts, but you experience physical symptoms, which maybe accompany going blank or not performing as well. So, sometimes having really bad, stomach, intestinal issues when you have exams, that's pretty common. Feeling pretty exhausted, feeling headachy. Yeah, do you want to speak from?
Yeah, it maybe before an interview or an exam, your hands get clammy, get cold, or your heart starts racing. For me, my shoulders go up. Does anyone have any physical symptoms that they exhibit when they take exams? Or if you're comfortable with sharing? No?
Yeah, and anytime we ask a question, people on Zoom can put things in the chat as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this is the slide I thought was
yeah.
coming next. Yeah, so there's some different situations around anxiety, and they're not all really exam anxiety. There's just the normal nervousness that comes with not knowing if you're prepared. That's not really what we're getting at, although some of these strategies might help with that as well. Um, it's more like number two, which is kind of the classic exam anxiety, that even when you're prepared, you're freezing up and that sort of thing on exams. And the third situation is more general. And it might be, an anxiety disorder that can be diagnosed, where you have those symptoms. Usually it's more like longer term, maybe extending into high school and also in other situations, just feeling incredibly anxious. Um, and then, sometimes people might say I have exam anxiety, but I think this one in the bubble is kind of more like me, what I was like when I was a student. Because I would just be, I'd have all these racing thoughts when I was studying, and it would fuel procrastination, which we talked about on Wednesday's workshop. But when I'd actually get into the exam, I would kind of pull myself together. And so I don't think I had classic exam anxiety, even though I always felt pretty anxious around exam time. Yeah. So we're getting to the strategies, and the first category of strategies is having some healthy habits. And sleep is so primary. I mean, I am a mom, and I'm going to be a mom on this slide as well, because, I'm always saying like sleep is good, not just for like problem solving ability, like anything that goes on with your brain. You need a good regular 8, even 9 hour sleep for students at your age. And I know sleep is the first thing to go when you're trying to cram, or maybe you're just really anxious and can't sleep before an exam. But as well as interfering with your, problem solving ability, your memory, your concentration, like all those things that'll help you actually write the exam. Lack of sleep interferes with your emotional management. So if you're really trying to control the anxiety, then, maybe look at trying to do some really good sleep hygiene, stopping your studying, like say the exam's in the morning, and maybe you want to stop studying at dinner time and have like a good wind down period in the evening, so that you can sleep.
How many people have actually thought, like, if I just studied an extra 2 to 3 hours tonight, right before my exam, or pull an all-nighter, I'm gonna learn so much more. And it backfired. Yeah, right?
Yeah, and
It's
have
a
you
lot.
experienced the backfire? You're nodding. Yeah,
Right.
so for sure, for sure. And I am a mom of a university student, and when she's like studying into the evening and she starts getting kind of cranky, I'm like, go to bed. That's the best thing you can do for your brain right now. Exercise. Exercise is a very common healthy habit. And, when I talk to students, it sounds like a lot of students have a really good fitness routine, which is fantastic. But you're more at risk, I think, for experiencing anxiety due to lack of exercise if you have a normal, really good fitness routine. Because people who don't have a normally good fitness routine, their body is used to not having a lot of exercise. But if you normally have a lot of exercise and you're like, oh, I'm too busy right now, I'm not going to be going to the gym this week because of exams, like you have just deprived yourself of the outlet for your stress. A lot of the time when you exercise, it really helps your body on a chemical level deal with the stress. And it also helps energize you, and you need energy to keep going on with the studying. And like physical exertion will balance out all the mental exertion that you're doing while you're studying. So like the worst thing you can do is to cut out your normal exercise routine, or even like make it shorter. If anything, maybe you want to boost it up. Same with sleep during the exam period. And then there's the whole issue of substances. And not only are these, maybe not great habits in general, but, things like cigarettes, nicotine, caffeine, sugar, marijuana, those are all substances that will actually chemically increase the anxiety in your body. You know, so
Especially in combination with lack of sleep.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's usually when the caffeine is used, you know.
Exactly.
It's like, I don't need sleep this week. I'm just gonna drink a lot of Red Bull. Yeah, and it just really can ramp up the anxiety. So you know, this is something to be conscious of. And you know, if you're used to, like, I mean, I'm standing here with my cup of coffee. If you're used to having a cup of coffee in the morning, you know, you don't need to give it up during exams, but like, don't greatly increase the caffeine intake. Um, okay, so that was the healthy habits. And the next thing is about being prepared, you know, and of course we've talked about, like, if you're not prepared, I mean, if you are prepared, you might still experience exam anxiety. But it is more likely to hit the less prepared you feel. And sometimes if you do feel like really secure in your preparation, it can help. So it's about starting early. So we talked about the student who started 2 weeks before, and you know, that's a really good time to start with the pre-exam studying. But when I investigated further with that student, he, you know, during the regular term, he was like going to classes, he was like completing his reading and his assignments, but he really did very little in terms of like reviewing, trying to remember what he learned, try to make connections between what he learned, trying to, you know, do practice questions or anticipate the sorts of questions that might be asked. So it's good to distribute all of that, like really all throughout the term. I know you're hearing this shortly before exams, but for next term, you know, and then the further in advance you can start studying for exams, the better. So it's March, is it March 28th? Yeah, it's March 28th. I think exams end on like April 26th. So you know, very conceivably, some of you probably have an exam that's like a month away. You know, and it's probably not too early. I mean, well, when I say you can do it all term, like maybe now is when you just sort of start reviewing. And we have a study strategy workshop as well that's already gone by. And it's about how if you start studying early, then you can repeatedly hit the same material and then be more secure in the knowledge of that material, have a better recollection, and be more able to make connections between material and to questions that might be asked.
And as Ruth mentioned, that Level Up Your Study Skills workshop, we did hold it last week. It was recorded. So if you weren't able to attend, feel free to listen to that recording as well.
Yeah, and I'll show you on like one of the last slides shows the Student Learning Commons homepage, and I can show you how to find it.
Yeah, and it covers distributed practice or study groups.
Yeah, yeah. So doing practice testing, I mean, sometimes even writing a practice exam can really lower your anxiety because, you know, like what you're going to be doing is more familiar with you. The timing of any practice exam is super important because you don't want to do it like the day before. If you do it the day before and you get a lot of things wrong, you know, that can increase anxiety because you have a lot of, you know, you don't have enough time to fill in the gaps. But, you know, say you know, start now and the exam's in like a month, maybe 4 days before or something. You know, you're pretty familiar with the material, do a practice exam, time yourself, and then you would have some time to fill in any gaps. And of course, study groups also, they're like good for trying out explaining things to other people, getting a source of help, getting people to quiz you with questions maybe you haven't thought of. All right, quantitative courses, there's some additional preparation strategies. And the preparation strategies I talked about before also apply to quantitative courses. And we actually, that's the workshop that's coming up April 7th at 11:30. We have a workshop with physics professor Sarah Johnson. And we're going to go in more detail about preparing for quantitative exams. So I think everybody knows you want to practice with problems. Practice, 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 practice. That's how to prepare. But the thing is that practicing with problems is not necessarily the same for each person, and some ways of doing it are better than other ways. So some students play the numbers game in that they're like, okay, I'm doing a problem set. It has 20 questions. Okay, I got 18 of them, no problem. I'm not going to worry about the other two. If that's you, you have to force yourself to do the hard ones that you trip up on. You know, and there are even some students that like will always skip the hard ones when they're doing problem sets and whatever. And that sets you up for anxiety. You know, so like not only if you force yourself to do the problems, you're learning how to solve problems like that, but you're learning a process of getting through that discomfort that you feel when you don't right away know how to solve a problem. So, you know, if you hit a difficult problem and it's not on a test, you know, you have time to like try different things, you know, write down what you know, what you're trying to find, maybe try a diagram, try different ways of solving it, going for help, you know, trying to get a hint from a TA to get you to the next level so you can solve it. And yeah, I mean, it might feel uncomfortable, like maybe you are a little bit anxious, but not as anxious as you'd be on an exam. So if you know, make a habit of getting through the difficult problems that way, then you'll get to an exam. And quantitative courses, they almost always have problems that are kind of curveballs on them. You know, and you always have enough information to solve them, but the way they're presented is maybe unrecognizable. And that's one thing that we talk about at the other workshop. If you are not habituated to working through your discomfort and solving difficult problems, that's when a lot of the times people freak out and freeze. So I think people are more likely, you know, to have exam anxiety affect them on problem solving exams than other types of exams for that reason. So you have to be experienced with solving problems of all levels of difficulty, all types. And the other thing is without headaches, you know, because sometimes you might just go back to like all of your sort of homework problems. And it's like, okay, well, you know, this week I was doing homework on, you know, trigonometric functions or something. So I'm going to solve all my trigonometric functions one. You know, and it's like, well, you know that that's what you have to do. Whereas if you have mixed problem sets, it's better preparation for a test because you don't know what type of problem it is, and you have to figure that out just like you would on a test. And so that's why it's really good to practice from previous exams. I mean, it also helps you gauge what sort of questions to expect and whatever. But one advantage is just being hit with a whole bunch of questions all mixed up together, and you have to figure out what type it is. So that's a link in the Department of Math. Are you okay? Okay. I'll just keep talking. Yeah, so the Department of Math has online a bunch of exams with practice problems. Chemistry also has that, and other times you can ask for sample problem sets from your professor or your TA.
Oh,
Oh
I'm so
dear,
sorry.
it's okay.
This is my slide.
Oh,
Okay,
it's your slide, oh no.
yeah. So my apologies, I'm getting over a cold. And of course, it's being recorded, so great timing. So basically, on Wednesday, we talked about procrastination. And some of the anxiety is fueled by the fear of unknown. So let's switch that and try to think of reframing of what can you do that's in your control, like the timing of your exam, where it's located, the format, is it cumulative? Is it from the last midterm? What can you bring? What type of calculator? Are calculators allowed? What type of stationery? If you haven't been to the location before, maybe use your Snap app or Room Finder to try to find it. If it's a late evening exam or a late afternoon, know that there might be rush hour, so you might have to schedule some more commuting time to get to campus. Once you get to the classroom or the lecture hall, visualize yourself there writing the exam. If it's empty, maybe take one of those practice math midterms or finals with you to like write, so you're used to that environment. And basically, you don't want to focus on the unknown because that's not in your control and that fuels anxiety. So try to focus on the things that you do know and have everything prepared ahead of time. Double, triple check your exam date and time, because how many people have had dreams or nightmares where you actually have missed it, right? So try to reverse that and plan accordingly. Yeah, there's so many times also that Neela has handed out calculators for people who need to write their midterm like 5 minutes before. That causes unnecessary panic. So have it all ready. Your student IDs also, because I've heard of a student who froze during his exam because he like was just like his thought process was interrupted because his ID was not on him. So you know what I mean? So like have all those things ready.
And it says visualizations, and actually, if you are involved in sports or music or dance or something, often part of the coaching will be, not doing another practice, but doing a really vivid visualization of succeeding in the performance or the game or whatever it is. And there's often scripts, and one of the resources you're going to get by email has a recording that will take you through the process of visualizing a successful exam. Okay. This night before and the day of, it's a little bit fluid because it kind of depends what time of day your exam is. But, if this is kind of assuming it's a morning exam. Is this your slide too? I can't remember.
So yeah, basically the night before, have everything packed, your wallet, with your ID, your stationery that you can bring, formula sheets, if you're allowed any formula sheets, have it all ready to go. I love this one. Post a positive affirmation. It might sound cheesy, but having a little post-it note, or even I've heard people using their lipstick to write on the mirror, a little simple. What was the one that you used on Wednesday? I really liked it.
Oh, I can't remember,
You
but
can
I
do
mean,
hard things.
nothing too crazily optimistic.
Yeah.
But, I've gotten through difficult exams before.
Yeah.
Something realistic like that.
Yeah, I love that. So that way you can sort of recite it. That could be your mantra.
Oh, I know what you said, Wednesday. It's we can do hard things.
We can do hard things.
That became my mantra when I had this big financial thing I had to deal with.
I love it.
We can do hard things.
And we can. We're built for resiliency. It might not seem like it, but we are. For the day of, basically, you don't want to rush. So set your alarm ahead of time. Give yourself some breathing room, buffer. So once again, even though you might think like, oh, it takes me half an hour to come to campus, but if it's a different time than you're used to, it might take longer. Or if there's transit delays, which we know it happens, as well as an accident on a bridge, just be mindful of those things and have alternate routes as necessary. So leave early, no rushing. This positive visualization, we just talked about it in the previous slide, along with your mantra that you created for yourself. This one might seem different to you, but avoid talking to your classmates before. So if you happen to get to your test area quite early, maybe have your headphones in, take a walk around to get that physical exertion out, because you're going to be sitting for a few hours, but avoid your classmates. The reason being is that they can start planting seeds of doubt and negativity in your head without you realizing it. So basically, they'd be like, oh, I spent all this time studying for this. And then you realize, oh, shoot, I forgot to review this entirely. And that might not even be tested, but then you're just ruminating on the fact that you missed something. Mm-hmm. So avoid your classmates. This is especially important after your final exam.
That too.
Because that is just a disaster. And then also ground yourself. So I'm gonna go over that, what grounding means.
And just the next, the QR code, that also links to that visualization recording.
Oh, yeah, perfect. And I'm glad, my coughing fit has disappeared.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, grounding exercises. Has anyone heard of grounding before or might know what it means? Yeah.
Question.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It says, I usually say good luck to a few classmates before exams. Is that okay?
Oh, that's sweet. No, I love that. No, good luck. If you're keeping it simple and as long as you're not opening it up to conversation,
Yeah,
I feel like a simple good luck is actually, it's a really nice positive vibe that you're sending out to your friends.
as
And then
long as,
receiving.
yeah, and as long as if the person starts talking to you further after that, be like, you just have to be direct and say, it's just gonna freak me out if we talk about the exam,
It's
so.
like when you hear spoilers and you're like, la, 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 maybe you do one of those. You had a question? Oh, no? Okay. I saw your hand.
For comment.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fantastic.
Blood sugar is often overlooked in the 3-hour marathon exams. Eat before exam, bring a drink or snack, or drink with sugar calories in it to maintain blood sugar if you need it.
Oh, I love that one.
Absolutely.
Yes, if you're allowed to bring a snack, as long as it's not too crinkly, because you know, sometimes that distracts other people, but definitely bring something so that you're sustaining your blood sugar levels. Check if you're low iron, you might need some iron-rich foods. I don't know, but basically make sure you stay hydrated. But not too much where you have to like get up and pee after. But make sure you have the energy to write such a long exam. So back to grounding activities. So basically,
Another one?
oh, another one. Fantastic.
I love the participation.
Yes.
This breathing slowly, but honestly, everything kicks in suddenly the last 30 minutes, but then I'm panicking because I have so much to write within that span.
Yes, so I guess we'll cover some of the writing exam tips too, and I'm gonna cover breathing shortly. But yeah,
One is
those are
solid.
fantastic.
Yeah, that's a solid
Fantastic.
suggestion.
Tips from the chat on Zoom. So basically, grounding activities, essentially, when you are feeling anxious or worried, the first thing you're doing is skipping ahead or ruminating about the past. So what I mean by skipping ahead is thinking about the worst case scenarios, like, oh my God, I'm blanking, I'm gonna fail. Everything is over. So those are like the worst case scenarios you're thinking about in the future, or you're thinking about your past exam taking, like I did so badly on the midterms, there's no way I'm gonna bring it up now, like this is just reinforcing that idea, or I've done poorly in the past, or whatever it is. So to snap out of it, because you know yourself that you've studied, you can do a grounding activity where it brings you back to the present moment. And when you are brought back to the present moment, basically you can sort of unfreeze yourself from that anxiety. So I'm gonna bring you through a simple grounding activity where how do you bring yourself to the present moment? By maybe being in tune with your senses. So a simple grounding activity is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where the 5 means you're gonna see 5 things in the room. You're gonna be very objective. You're gonna say like, I see a gray floor. I see students in front of me. Just list 5 things. 4 things that you hear or touch. I always forget which one, but basically make it work for you. 4 things that you touch. So like you might say like, I feel the hard seat under me. I feel the firm floor under my feet. I feel the draft from the HVAC unit. Things like that. The third one is things you hear. So you might hear like the pencil scratching on pieces of paper or paper flipping, or you might hear some murmuring in the hallway outside. things like that. Two is, what did I miss?
Smell.
Smell, thank you. Two things you smell, and then one is one thing you taste. Obviously, if these are difficult, you can modify it to however it works for you. This is just one example of a grounding activity. At the end of this presentation, I'm gonna go over some breathing techniques that also help. But basically, walking yourself through a grounding activity, when you realize those cognitive symptoms or physical symptoms that we went over in the first couple slides, when you notice those things are coming on, that's when you want to find a grounding activity that works for you. And it's beneficial to start practicing these grounding activities before the exam time, because during the exam, you don't want to be like, oh, what did Ruth and Maisie say again? Because that will add more anxiety and stress. And we don't want that. So practice and see what works for you. And then you can go about your exam again. And these resets only take like 30 seconds. So instead of freezing for like the rest of the exam, reset yourself in 30 seconds to a minute. So
Yeah, and this QR code, it links to actually almost like a workbook for exam anxiety, and it has like breathing techniques in it. It has tensing and relaxing your muscles. Like it just describes a lot of things you can do.
yeah. And obviously, if you practice meditation, it's a great idea, but you might not be able to obviously do a full meditation during the exam. So maybe a quick body scan would be great.
Yeah, so on the subject of meditation, if you want to learn and get practice in meditation so that it'll work really well when you need it, Health and Counseling has Zoom sessions for like a half hour where they will practice with you. And that's at that QR code, which you will get with the slides. And they also on their website, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, on their website, they have audio recordings with scripts for these different types of meditations and progressive muscle relaxation, including body scan. And then if you scroll down on the recordings, they are suggesting a bunch of apps. And there are a bunch of meditation apps. You could just find it at the App Store, but they have ones that they think are particularly good. Yeah. So moving away from like the bodily, the mindfulness kind of approach to addressing anxiety, there's the cognitive approach, and it's about kind of changing your thinking. So, sometimes you have racing thoughts, sometimes you're not even necessarily in touch with what you're thinking, but a lot of the time you know what you're thinking, like you're thinking you're gonna fail or whatever it is. Don't just accept that thought, challenge that thought. So, there are different ways to do that. One is to weigh the evidence, and like, oh, I'm going to fail, and it's like, well, why do I think I'm going to fail? How have I been doing this course so far? I've attended all the classes, I've, gotten 8 out of 10 and above on all my labs, I can do, most of the homework problems and I have time to practice the other ones, so really just, testing the hypothesis as if you were doing a scientific experiment, right? And there are different faulty thinking patterns that if you get familiar with what they are, then it's easier to kind of intervene if you find yourself doing that. So overgeneralizing, it's like, oh, I never do as well as I should on my exams, and so that one is like, okay, think of a counter example where you did do, maybe brought your mark up on exams or something. Filtering. So that's where, you're thinking more about the negative experiences and you're disregarding the positive experiences. So if you can identify yourself doing that, you can stop. The black and white, like everything is like fantastic or it's terrible. So certainly if you have an issue with perfectionism, it's like that. It's like either I get an A or I'm going down the tubes. It's like, no, there's a lot of in-between points between getting an A and failing, catastrophic thinking. That's when, it's like, I'm going to fail. Actually, my daughter was doing it this morning because she has a job interview. And she's like, well, what if I don't get the job? What if I don't get any job this summer? And I'm totally bored all summer. And, and dad gets me to like work around the house all summer and I'd hate that. That's like, this is your first job interview for a summer job. There are many summer jobs, right? So, you challenge it that way. Sometimes when it's an exam, you're thinking about, well, if I fail this, I won't get into the program I want. If I don't get the program I want, then, why be in university? And then I'll drop out and then I'll, won't be able to get a job and I'll end up being on the street. Like, I actually personally probably can admit to thinking things like that when I was in university. And it's like, no, there's so many leaps there, right? And magnification or minimization, so like making it really huge, like, it's an exam that's worth 25%, and it's just like you're disproportionately blowing it up in your head. So, I mean, one thing to address that is maybe thinking about, okay, like a year from now, are you going to even remember this exam? And if the answer is yes, then it's like, okay, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm sure, I do not remember a lot of things that I probably didn't do well in university.
And what I like to tell students with the magnification minimization, if they say they failed an exam and I ask, how much is it worth? And then they said, oh, my midterm was worth 15%. So put all that grading breakdown into a spreadsheet and realistically see what you need to achieve on your final exam to pass the course. Because quite often, if it's only a 15 or 20% midterm, there's still a lot of weight in the final. So realistically, that way you don't start to spiral.
Yeah, but still, okay, a word of caution about that one.
Oh, okay.
Because if the math doesn't really work out and you're like, I couldn't possibly pass this class no matter how well I do in the final, and then that causes people to give up and like not even try. But you don't know, like maybe it's going to be curved, right?
Yeah, or maybe you can go to the instructor ahead of time during office hours and say like, can I get my midterm and final reweighed so that my final is worth more?
Mm-hmm. They will often do that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then another cognitive strategy is just kind of the reframing, so instead of I'm going to fail, it's like, well, I've got a week, and I'll see what I can do in the week. The more I do in the week, the less likely it is I'm going to fail. Okay. So another cognitive strategy is looking for exceptions, so if you are like worried that this exam period coming up, I'm going to be in the throes of exam anxiety. I invite you to think back at a time when you did write a test or an exam and you didn't have exam anxiety. So, ideally, if you have a university exam or at another post-secondary institution with no exam anxiety, think of that time. Some of you might have to go back into high school to think of a time when you did not have exam anxiety. And once you have thought of a situation, then I'm inviting you to think about, well, what was different between that exam and other exams where you did have exam anxiety. And it's better if you focus on things within your control, like Maisie was saying. So, like it's a little bit easy and not necessarily productive to just say, okay, well, that was an easier exam, close the book on it, So try to dig a little bit deeper and think about, if you can't, like actions you took or didn't take, if you can't think of anything you did differently behaviorally, how were you thinking about the exam? Like if it was an easy exam and you're ready to dismiss it, I mean, did you go in confidently, like thinking that it was going to be easy? So really try to examine what you did to not have anxiety on that exam. And then the next step is, can you make the transfer? You know, can you bring some of your way of thinking at the time of the non-anxious exam or some of the actions you took at the time of the non-anxious exam and do that again now? You know, so I mean, it could just be as simple as, you know, I had somebody to go into the, you know, to do the commute with me on the way to the exam. And so I was out of my head, you know, and all these other exams, I was overthinking things when I was alone on transit or something. So, has anybody, you know, can anyone contribute? Anything that came out of that reflection?
Anything on Zoom? Sometimes it's just getting a good night's sleep. Nothing? Oh, yes.
I think we like focusing on exam prep, like, I guess if you're a super organized person or have like, I don't know if it's type 1 or type B, but one or the other tendencies, right? Like you naturally do better when things are organized and you have time allocated into like a calendar or something like that.
So preparation.
So for me, like, you know, really like prioritizing that and then everything else kind of aligns naturally.
Yeah, and maybe like, you know, kind of having a structure, like a study plan or something, whereas other times when you've just kind of studied when you have the chance or whatever, maybe it didn't go as well or something.
Yeah.
I find that something that contributes to my exam anxiety is like when I've heard reviews from other people about that prof or something, that like be aware or like stay away. You know, that really contributes to my exam anxiety because you don't have that certainty that, yeah.
So how do you block that from?
I don't know. Like, well, I know that I've already enrolled in the course.
Yes.
And I've already like committed to it, might as well just.
Stick it
Follow through.
Yeah.
Follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like my daughter sometimes would come home and she's taking this one course now and she's had 2 people saying that it's really hard course. It was like their worst grade, blah, blah, blah. You know, and she's like, well, I'm really enjoying the class, you know, so maybe that's the difference. Cause like I'm, you know, really getting into it. I'm engaging with it maybe more than they do because I like it so much. You know, so if you kind of think about maybe a difference between your approach, yourself and the other people, that might help as well, right?
Yeah, and just knowing you've already done the midterms with that instructor that had 4 ratings. So if you were able to survive the midterms, then most likely you sort of know what the assessments will look like for the final. So that sort of helps mitigate some of that uncertainty too. Anything else? No? Okay, great.
Thank you. There are really a couple really good examples.
Really
out of that
great.
one. Okay, so we told the person with the exam writing strategy on Zoom that we're going to be getting to it. So
Yes.
this is it, the exam writing strategies. The first step is to do a memory dump when you get into the exam. So sometimes a lot of the anxiety is centered around something specific, like, oh no, I'm gonna forget this key piece of information. I'm gonna forget this formula. We don't have a formula sheet. You know, oh, you know, what'll I do if I forget this? All is lost. Even though that's catastrophizing, because there's probably a lot of other questions that have nothing to do with it. But sometimes people fixate on, you know, one or like a few pieces of information they're afraid of forgetting. So the thing to do is as soon as the proctor of the exam says, oh, you can start writing, instead of looking at the exam, just like write down on a piece of paper everything that you're afraid of forgetting and maybe rip that piece of paper out of the booklet so that you have access to it. Second step is to like skim the entire exam. And if you see a hard question while you're skimming, like you don't need to go into it in detail, you know, because you don't want it to trigger the anxiety more. But like you don't do that question, you just like keep going. And then probably you'll see a number of them that you think you can do. And you know, and maybe like put a mark next to the questions that you want to tackle first because they're kind of easy. And that's to build confidence. And it's also so that you don't spend so much time at the outset on the harder ones that you lose marks by not getting to the ones that you could have gotten full marks on. But yeah, if you do like the easy ones first, it builds confidence. I used to jump around like crazy when I was writing exams and it worked for me. You know, I'd do like question 7, question 14, question 12B, you know, and then I do question 12A like 3 pages later, you know, it's just, yeah, like the people marking the exams, they can get over that.
In terms like we've had like, right, like I've done it before, like writing booklet, but I don't know if profs, like, is it, I messed up, like I was supposed to, it was supposed to be double spaced, but I did it. Like, and then I realized after, and I made sure it was okay, so I double spaced, but like that caused exam anxiety for me because I was like sort of panicking with like, oh my goodness, like what? But I was gonna say like if let's say you're starting with question, you're not writing the question down in chronological order. Is it okay if you write like 1 and then like 2, 4, or if you ask this
Oh.
question to the professor to clarify, because then it would reduce, personally for me, exam anxiety in the sense of having to focus on them being chronological order, having enough space for the questions, like allocating the
Great
booklet.
question.
I don't know.
I guess if you have a plain booklet, I would ask the prof or
Would ask
TA,
the-
yeah, ahead of time.
Okay, good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, ask ahead of time.
I don't think I fully understood that.
Yeah, I
mean,
know,
it
like
looks
if you have a
you've answered
blank,
that.
if you have a blank booklet and you have a separate question page, I don't know,
Mhm.
like sometimes a Scantron, sometimes it's within the booklet. Definitely ask ahead of time. That's the exam format that like get clarity on how the exam is gonna be.
Yeah, and I also know that if it's online, sometimes you can't see the whole exam on
Right.
time, because like they'll just give you one question.
Question at a time, so unfortunately you can't jump
Yeah,
around
there's
that
nothing
way.
you can do, but if you can,
Yes.
then do it. And the other thing you can do when you skim the whole exam first is get a sense of how long each question should take, you know.
And sometimes some of the questions answer some of the other questions that you don't know, or the weird questions.
I think we're gonna get to that.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
And then, yeah, using a highlighter, you know, so I guess you gave the example of missing an instruction until later. If it's a written instruction, having a highlighter can really help, you know, so the first time you read the exam and it's like, oh, for this question, it says double space, I'm gonna highlight that. And also, you know, like quantitative exams, if you are somebody who drops negative signs sometimes or forgets the units or whatever, like use the highlighter for those things. Use it for, you know, confusing wording in multiple choice questions, like if it says always, highlight always, you know, for example. Yeah. Yeah, so this is, with multiple choice, multiple choice is the one.
You can hand it around.
Yeah, I don't know if we have enough, but multiple choice is the one that anxiety seems to most affect. Because sometimes you're having to really make fine distinctions, and if you're not thinking really clearly because of anxiety, you can be jumping back and forth and getting really confused. So Maisie is handing around some strategies for multiple choice exams. And this is like my primary tip. I think everybody knows about the process of elimination, but before you even do the process of elimination, sometimes you want to cover up the possible answers and just think about the question stem. Because if you can identify like right away, this is the answer, then you're less likely to be confused by an answer that's similar. Okay. And then on essay and short answer exams, essay and short answer questions, you could be like kind of disorganized in your thinking because of anxious, like if your thoughts are racing, whatever. One of the things you might do is like, say you do, you know, it says do 3 out of these 5 questions. And sometimes you just kind of go back and forth between 2 questions, like for the third one. And it's like, no, don't do that. Like decide early which ones you're going to do and highlight the ones you're going to do and stick to it. And also, like if you're writing a long essay, it's easy to kind of forget what you're wanting to say or to be repetitive or, you know, whatever, or ramble. So even just jotting down a very quick outline is a good idea. And if you submit the outline, you might actually get some points if you haven't had a chance to actually, you know, mention the last couple of points.
I also want to say sometimes, especially in the life science courses, a diagram is sufficient. a diagram with a brief explanation. So I've seen some students write pages, like a full page of text. When I remember when I only did a simple diagram and that happened to get full marks, and the ones that rambled had marks docked off because they were saying incorrect things. So just something to be mindful of, that you can sometimes succinctly express like what pictures are worth 1,000 words type of thing. So
Okay. Yeah, we talked about that. We can go ahead. Oh, and what about if the exam has long answer and multiple choice? That's I guess what Maisie was getting at. What order would you approach those exams in? Anyone have any suggestions?
I'll do the multiple choice first,
Mm-hmm.
because some of them are kind of just givers, like,
Yeah.
you know, what they want, and yeah, it just clarifies things and again, builds confidence.
It's along the same lines as what Maisie was saying, and also about doing the easy ones first. Yeah, and I think that is like kind of right with a twist. Anyone else want to express their opinions? Yeah.
I personally like to do the written part first because it's like it saves me time, and then the multiple choices. Usually I always find the multiple choice harder than the written for some reason. Because like everything just seems so similar. It's like, what do I write? So
Yeah, you don't want to get trapped overthinking a 1-point question for like 5 minutes or something. And there's something on Zoom.
For the specific strategies, but for Jim, I found jumping around to actually increase anxiety. And also some profs put expected time on the session basis, so you would know you're on pace. And so I went in order of confidence and would have no idea of my progress.
Okay.
everyone's different, which is you'll discover what type of test taker you are. So everyone has a preference, as we discovered.
There's always exceptions, but I think in general, the strategy of doing the ones you're confident in first works well. Okay, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, like, depending on time, I would do either written or multiple choice first, like, if it's a 50-minute exam,
Okay,
maybe you focus on the written part first.
the crazy thing is all three of you are kind of right. Like there's elements of right in all of
Yeah,
it. So, so what I would suggest is reading the long answer questions first so that you have them in mind. Then, here, can you go to the next slide? Oh, it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
on the
Yeah,
next
no,
slide.
it's not.
Okay, and then taking kind of a pass through the multiple choice ones, answering the easy multiple choice ones. Don't get sucked in to like really be overthinking the ones that you can't answer right away, but just answer the ones you can answer right away. And you're reading all of them, and so you're getting any of the clues you can get from the multiple choice. Then go back to the long answer them in the order from easiest to hardest. And then go back and do the harder multiple choice questions, knowing that if you don't get to some of them, you can just like bubble them in usually, unless there's marks taken off for wrong answers.
And I like this point of sticking to your initial choice in either for multiple choice or essay, just because a lot of the time we second guess ourselves.
Especially with anxiety.
Yes, and then always, like we talked about this in the level of your study skills workshop, but relating things back to what you know to be true, and would that make sense in that context? So sometimes it's useful to cover up the multiple choice answers so that if you know the answer, you think it out loud, or not out loud, think about it, and then uncover and see if you have one of the answers on the multiple choice. But definitely sticking to your original gut is useful. So once again, I'm gonna introduce another grounding activity. But basically it's all about noticing when your cognitive or physical symptoms of anxiety do arise. You definitely want to make sure that when you're noticing these things, that you'll see that they come, you'll notice them earlier and earlier And then that way you're more attuned with your body and what you exhibit as symptoms. So, and then that way you can introduce these grounding activities, the ones that work for you earlier, and then sort of nip that anxiety in the bud. So we talked about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or a quick like meditation. The other one is to ground yourself is with breathing, because when you're breathing, you're focusing on the present moment. So which techniques are good for relaxing you and causing less anxiety? Well, basically you want to breathe in a way that your exhale is longer than your inhale. Because what happens when you start breathing more with your inhale is you start to hyperventilate. You activate that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response, and your heart rate increases naturally. So when you exercise, think about it that way. When you're breathing harder, your heart rate increases, you might get sweatier, you might get more anxious. So we want to reverse that by activating the parasympathetic nervous system by having your exhale longer than your inhale. So if you inhale for 4, exhale for 8. And if you do that a couple times, you'll notice that automatically I'm talking slower. Your shoulders might come down. You might be a bit more relaxed. So breathing this way, a quick reset only takes 30 seconds out of your exam time versus an entire hour wasted on rumination or anxiety. So remember to breathe in for a shorter period of time when you exhale for a longer period of time.
Yeah, and I was just doing that. I was trying it out. And it occurred to me that when you breathe like that, it's almost like how you naturally breathe when you're asleep.
Yes.
So it can really bring you down.
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, I like to do that when I'm trying to sleep.
Mhm.
Also, another good sleeping tip is sometimes you're thinking in bed and that's why you can't sleep, even though you try to get a good night's sleep. Do memory dump, have a notepad or your phone available on your nightstand, and do a memory dump if you have thoughts cluttering your brain. Because quite often, once you do that, then you can get a good night's sleep. So thank you for bringing that up.
All right. Yeah. And I'm not going to say too much about this, but, always go in and write the exam, even if you don't think it's mathematically possible to pass, right? Because maybe it's curved. The other thing is when you are in the exam, especially quantitative, just keep trying. Like I remember a 3-hour stats exam and it was like crazy hard. And a lot of my classmates were leaving even after a half hour or an hour, and I knew very well that it wasn't because they aced it. They were just kind of giving up and I just kept going. And I think this is an advantage of being able to remain calm when there are difficult problems through to practice. So I didn't know how to answer a lot of the questions, but I just kept trying. And I felt horrible when I left the exam, but I mean, I sat out the whole 3 hours and I trying the whole time. And I ended up getting an A+, which was higher than my grade going in because I believe that it was curved. And the fact that I just stayed and kept trying, like, even if I didn't get everything right, really
You can
helped.
do hard things.
Yeah, we can do hard things and we can keep doing hard things for the full 3 hours. Yeah, reward yourself and maybe plan your reward in advance, right? Because maybe that'll keep you going. Like, my daughter has a paper that's due this weekend and we have tickets to the Junos on Sunday night. So like I think, she's I think home working on it now because like the thought of if I finish this early, I'll be able to go to the Junos is kind of moving her forward.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's a fun reward.
yeah. And they're free. Somebody gave them to us. That's great. Okay, so additional sources of help. If you try a lot of these self-help strategies and you still keep experiencing exam anxiety, health and counseling is like the best resource. Because like a lot of the counselors there, they treat exam anxiety over and over and over because they're at a university, right? So they're very experienced with successful treatment of exam anxiety. Also the Center for Accessible Learning, if you have an anxiety disorder that you've been diagnosed with, they can maybe give you some accommodations that might help. You know, maybe like if you keep freezing and so it takes a lot of time and you run out of time, they might give you time and a half, for example. Or if like being around other people writing the exam increases the anxiety, they might give you a private space. And if you're not diagnosed, but you're thinking that you might have an anxiety disorder because anxiety is impairing various parts of your life, you might want to check it out initially with a doctor at Health and Counseling, or even, you know, your family doctor if you have one, and then go to the Center for Accessible Learning. Okay, so I did promise that I could show you where the workshop recordings are, and we now have recording about study strategies and from the procrastination workshop on Wednesday that are up there.
And today's.
Yeah, it will be. You go to find a workshop, and then there's this big long thing, but if you scroll all the way down, there's a link to workshop recordings at the bottom. Okay. And yeah, I think the QR code is to get a resource for lab reports or science writing. Yeah, and that's good. Okay.
And then you're familiar with SciSpace, you're here already. For those of you on Zoom or watching the recording, SciSpace is a great place to either study, have access to staff members like myself for academic advising, Carmen for student engagement, or Aiden with student success. So please feel free to come by. Yes, we have a question or comment.
Question and comments, back to the multiple choice.
Yes.
Thank you, Jim, for sharing so much. Multiple choice first, always for Jim. It primes my recall for the whole exam, and I will occasionally flip back from longer free-form answers and almost cite a source of a multiple choice question if it's related, and I'm confident with my answer.
Great.
Yeah. And
So this is, okay, so you have another one?
Sorry. Yes, one more comment and then a question. So apparently chemistry 121 gave a quarter mark back for leaving a multiple choice answer blank to avoid gamification.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't think Scantrons could do that, but.
Okay.
From Shifan, how does the reward system work and how would you allocate the reward according to what you need?
Yeah, so sometimes it could be a reward for a big reward for after the exam period, after your last exam. You might want to go out for a nice dinner or go out with your friends. Or sometimes it could be a nice little like treat, like, oh, I'm gonna treat myself to a blizzard, or like or going to the Junos. It's up to you and your what you like, what you enjoy, and something that you would look forward to. So everyone's different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, and some rewards are contingent, you know, like on, you know, if I achieve my study goals, then I'm going to give myself, you know, this reward. And some things like tickets to the Junos, you know, which would be wasted if you don't do it, like you have that anyhow, whether or not you achieve your goal. And that can still be valuable because it gives you something to look forward to. You know, if you feel like I'm in essay writing jail, you're like, well, I'll be out of essay writing jail at 5 o'clock on Sunday watching the Junos, right?
And then another thing is that you also want to make sure it's not interfering. The reward is not going to interfere with the following day exam. So say if you had exams back to back, you're not going to be like, my reward is to binge watch a series I've been looking forward to binge watching, because that's going to set yourself up for a disaster for the next day.
You know, this reminds me, I remember that I had 2 exams, like not quite back to back, but I had one in the morning, I had a couple of hours, and then I had another one at one point. And I had a new boyfriend. And so after the first exam, my boyfriend picked me up and we had lunch together and just kind of chilled. And then I went and wrote the other one. And it was a reward. And it was time limited, and it also was a really good mental break,
Yes.
you know? Okay, yeah. There are,
Oh. Do you want to
there
talk
are, yeah. Okay, well, what you do is you go on the SLC homepage and you go to that find a workshop link. You go to the very bottom, and then it gives you the choice of learning workshop recordings, where you will find the ones we do here, among other things, and writing workshop recordings. And, so there are some writing webinars, and there are also some just very quick, few minute writing videos too.
And we're partnering with the SLC, with Ruth, with some other staff members from the SLC.
Neela, and not Neela, Nia,
Yeah.
almost
And-
similar name, very similar.
And Aiden, so we're gonna be developing a science writing workshop. So very good timing on that.
Mhm.
If you want co-curricular record for attending this workshop, please feel free to scan this QR code. What is CCR? It's essentially like a transcript for all the extracurricular activities you do at SciSpace, or not SciSpace, SFU. So feel free to scan that, and then it's always a nice reminder of what you've done here while you're here as a student, what you could put on your resume, or something you could bring up during your maybe a future interview. Oh, sorry. Did everyone capture this? Yeah.
And you are going to be getting a copy of the slides, so you can get the QR code from the copy of the slides too.
Yeah, and as Ruth mentioned, we do have one last SLC workshop on Monday, April 7th. It is really close to final exam period, unfortunately, but
You'll still remember those tips when your exam comes. It'll stick in your mind. And that's with Dr. Sarah Johnson, because I know something about quantitative strategies, but she knows a lot about quantitative strategy.
get the inside scoop of what physics profs will put on their exams.